Chapter 21, the Augmented Sixth Chord. The augmented sixth chord is a unique harmony that involves a very specific chromatic voice leading of pitches resolving to the dominant. It can be considered as a chord with chromatic pitches and dominant preparation function, much like the Neapolitan chord, the 5-7 of 5 and the 7 diminished 7 of 5. One way of thinking of this augmented sixth chord is to consider the Phrygian cadence, but with one chromatically altered tone. You might recall that the Phrygian cadence occurs in a minor key, when the 4 chord in first inversion moves to the dominant chord at a half cadence. What makes this progression particularly interesting is the half-step descending motion in the bass as 4-6 moves to 5. When building an augmented sixth chord, the composer adds a chromatic alteration to one of the upper voices so that it can balance this bass motion symmetrically with another line that resolves one half-step up to the dominant pitch. In this example, the pitch F in the soprano of the 4 chord is raised one half-step to F sharp, and then it resolves one half-step up to the dominant pitch G in the following 5 chord. The resulting interval between the bass pitch, A flat, and the new chromatically altered pitch in the upper voice, F sharp, is an augmented sixth. And this is where the chord gets its name. The designation IT plus 6 is read Italian augmented sixth. Eventually, we will learn 3 varieties of this augmented sixth chord, the Italian, the German, and the French. Note that the pitch that was chromatically altered to create this augmented sixth interval was the root of the 4 chord, the F. And once it's altered like this, it's very difficult to speak of a theoretic or functional root of the chord. That is why we usually do not try to apply a Roman numeral designation. Augmented sixth chords can occur in major or minor keys. The most important aspect of this chord is the resolution of the augmented sixth interval, and this can be summarized as follows. Number 1. The voices of the augmented sixth interval resolve by moving in half steps. Number 2. The voices resolve in contrary motion, with the bass moving half step down and one of the upper voices moving a half step up. 3. Both voices move to dominant pitches of the 5 chord, that is, pitches that are the root tone of the following 5 chord. To master the voice leading of this chord, it's best to practice the placement and resolution of the augmented sixth interval. Here are the root tones of the dominant chord in the key of F minor. To write the augmented sixth interval that will lead to these pitches, simply write one pitch a minor second above the bass pitch C, and another pitch a minor second below the upper pitch C, as shown here. When writing augmented sixth intervals, the lowest pitch of the augmented sixth interval will usually be in the bass, but the upper pitch of the augmented sixth interval may be in any one of the upper voices. The Italian augmented sixth chord. This next example presents an Italian augmented sixth chord in 4 voices. Aside from the elements of the augmented sixth interval, the Italian augmented sixth includes a pitch, a major third above the bass, and this pitch is doubled. Here's another example of the Italian augmented sixth in the key of F sharp minor. In this example, the augmented sixth interval appears between the bass and the alto. Because it is an Italian version, the chord also includes a pitch a major third above the bass, in the tenor in this example, and the pitch is doubled in the soprano for this example. The augmented sixth interval of the augmented sixth chord can be written by locating the lowered sixth scale degree of the key in the bass voice and the raised 4th scale degree in an upper voice. Remember, when we write flat 6 here, we're not always saying that you necessarily have to flat the 6. It means you're lowering the 6th compared to a major scale. And when we write sharp 4, we're not always saying you're putting a sharp on the note. We're saying that you're raising the 4th note of the major scale a half step. When you are in a minor key, keep in mind that the 6th note of the scale already is lowered, so you do not need to alter it at all. but you will still need to alter the fourth scale degree. When writing this interval in a major key, additional accidentals are needed. This is because the lowest element of the augmented sixth interval, the lowered sixth scale degree, must be only a minor second above the dominant pitch that is found as the bass voice in the chord of resolution. While this lowered sixth scale degree occurs naturally in the minor key, we must lower the sixth degree of the major scale to write it, as shown in this example in the key of G. Here's the procedure for writing an Italian augmented sixth. Number 1. Write the lowered sixth scale degree in the bass and lead it down to the root tone of the dominant chord. Number 2. Write the raised fourth scale degree in an upper voice and lead it up to the doubled root of the dominant chord. 3. Find the pitch a major third above the bass tone of the augmented sixth chord and write it in one of the upper voices. And finally, number 4, double the pitch you used in the previous step and place it in one of the upper voices. In this example, Mozart employs an Italian augmented sixth chord to progress to the dominant by the end of the first phrase, which is in measure 4. Notice that even though the augmented sixth chord leads to a 1-6-4, the spelling and resolution is just as we have studied. Also, take note of the progression that leads from 1 to the augmented sixth chord in measure 3, and then on to the dominant in measure 4. This particular progression is a very common one that composers use to progress from 1 to the augmented sixth. The descending chromatic bass line is a particularly strong way to approach the cadence. The German augmented sixth chord. This chord functions the same way as the Italian, but it involves one additional pitch. The interval of the augmented sixth is written the exact same way, with the lowered sixth scale degree in the bass leading down to scale degree 5, and the raised fourth scale degree in an upper voice leading up to scale degree 5. However, we must add 2 additional and distinct pitches. One, a major third above the bass tone, and another that's a perfect fifth above the bass tone. This is not too difficult to remember, because these 2 additional pitches, along with the bass tone, actually comprise the structure of a major triad. These pitches can be written in any one of the upper voices, and the effect is a major triad structure that accompanies the augmented sixth interval. Another interesting aspect of the German augmented sixth chord becomes apparent if you consider an enharmonic spelling of the upper element of the augmented sixth interval, the F sharp here. If it were spelled as a G flat, you would see that the German augmented sixth chord is actually enharmonic to a dominant seventh chord, a major minor 7, A flat 7 in this case. Of course, we do not spell it this way, because its function and resolution is quite different, as we have been describing. Now here is an example of a German augmented sixth chord with a proper spelling in the key of C minor. In this example, the German augmented sixth is resolving to the 5 chord. And as you can see, the logical voice leading of the German augmented sixth to the 5 chord results in parallel fifths between the bass and tenor in this example. To avoid this problem, composers using the German augmented sixth chord will often lead to a 1-6-4 chord first, and then continue on to the 5 chord. This eliminates the parallel fifths, as shown in this example. Here's an example by Beethoven that uses the German augmented sixth chord, first leading to a 1-6-4 and then on to the 5 chord. This is the procedure for writing a German augmented sixth chord. First, write the lowered sixth scale degree in the bass and lead it down to the root tone of the dominant chord, scale degree 5. 2. Write the raised fourth scale degree in an upper voice and lead it up to the doubled root tone of the dominant chord, 5. 3. Find the pitch, a major third above the bass tone of the augmented sixth chord, and write it in one of the upper voices. And 4. Find the pitch that is a perfect fifth above the bass tone and place it in one of the upper voices. Occasionally, a composer will use an alternative spelling of the German augmented sixth chord when writing it in a major key. This involves a respelling of the pitch that is the perfect fifth above the bass tone. As an alternative version, this pitch can be spelled as a doubly augmented fourth above the bass pitch if a spelling like this facilitates the voice leading. Consider this example. In phrase A, the soprano must sing a chromatic line that is difficult to read as it moves from E to E flat and back to E. In phrase B, the respelling of E flat as D sharp makes the voice leading of this line much more clear and easy to read. In this example, Schumann employs an alternative spelling of the German augmented sixth chord in the very first measure. Notice that Schumann builds the augmented sixth interval of the German augmented sixth chord between the pitches G flat in the bass and E natural in the right hand. To make the chord German, he adds a major third above the bass, that's a B flat, as well as a perfect fifth above the bass. However, Schumann actually writes a C sharp as an enharmonic replacement for the D flat, a doubly augmented fourth above the bass, instead of a perfect fifth above the bass. This is to provide a more logical note spelling as the pitch moves on to D natural in the next measure. One final type of augmented sixth chord is the French. Like the Italian and the German, it uses the same pitches for the augmented sixth interval, but is distinguished by the remaining two pitches. In the case of the French augmented sixth chord, this includes a pitch that is a major third higher than the bass, just like the other two, and a pitch that is an augmented fourth higher than the bass. So here's the procedure for writing a French augmented sixth chord. 1. Write the lowered sixth scale degree in the bass and lead it down to the root tone of the dominant chord, that's scale degree 5. 2. Write the raised fourth scale degree in an upper voice and lead it up to the doubled root of the dominant chord, again to scale degree 5. 3. Find the pitch, a major third above the bass tone of the augmented sixth chord, and write it in one of the upper voices. And 4. Find the pitch that is an augmented fourth above the bass tone and place it in one of the other upper voices. Here's an example of the French augmented sixth in the key of A minor with its resolution. This example shows the chord in context. Notice that the French augmented sixth chord in this case includes the pitches F, the lowered sixth scale degree, and D sharp, the raised fourth scale degree, as well as A, the major third above the bass, and the pitch B, which is the augmented fourth above the bass. The pitch B is useful here, actually, because it anticipates the pitch B that will be included in the 5 chord that follows, here in measure 79. Okay, I'm going to do a quick review of everything we learned in this video. So as you can see, first we have the Italian augmented sixth chord. The bass voice is lowered sixth, and one of the upper voices, it could be the tenor, the alto, or the soprano, is raised 4. Here I am in the key of E. The lowered sixth scale degree in E is C natural. Because I'm in a major key, I will have to apply the natural. In a minor key, I wouldn't have to apply any accidental. One of the upper voices is sharp 4. So in the key of E, sharp 4 is A sharp. Here I'm going to put it in the tenor voice. Could have been in any of the top 3 voices. And for Italian, you need a major third above the bass. A major third above C is E. Notice in the chart, I also say you could think of that as scale degree 1. Some people find that easier to think of it that way. Scale degree 1 means I'm in the key of E, so that would be the pitch E. That's easy. And here I'll put it in the alto. And I need another one of those. I need to double it. I can even double it on the same pitch. As long as I've got 2 E's in 2 different voices, then that will work. And this is Italian. When I voice lead it, the C comes down to B by half step. The A sharp goes up to B by half step. And then these 2 voices just go to the closest possible pitches, stepwise, into the 5 chord. So here's my Italian augmented 6, going to 5. You can see that these all will be quite similar. I'm going to do the German next, and the lowered 6th scale degree and the raised 4th are the same. The difference with German is I need that major third above the bass. Notice the chart says you can also think of that as scale degree 1 in the key of E, which is E. And I also need a perfect 5th above the bass, C. That would be G. Notice the chart also says I could think of that as the lowered 3rd scale degree. In the key of E, the lowered scale degree 3rd is G natural. If I were doing this in a minor key, I would not need an accidental here because the lowered 3rd scale degree, well, in the minor key, the 3rd scale degree already is lowered. And just remember that when you do a German augmented 6 chord, most often you're going to go to a 1-6-4 chord first. So I need to bring this back to G sharp to make the 1 chord. And you can see the voice leading is quite clear. There's a common tone. Also remember that sometimes the German augmented 6 chord will be spelled enharmonically, so that instead of a G going to G sharp, you might see an F double sharp going to G sharp, just so that the half step leading is a little bit more clear. And then generally a 1-6-4 chord will lead to a 5 chord. And then finally we have the French. And the French, again, the same 2 pitches in terms of the lowered 6th scale degree and the raised 4th scale degree. And then we need a pitch that's a major 3rd above the C. That is also thought of as scale degree 1, which is an E in this case. And then we need a augmented 4th to make the French. You can also think of that as scale degree 2. Think of that. In the key of E, scale degree 2 is just F sharp. That's an easy way to get that pitch. And the nice thing about the French is after you've written that scale degree 2, the augmented 4th, that just stays as a common tone. The voice leading here is very clear, and these pitches do what they always do. The raised 4th, a half step up, the lowered 6th, a half step down, and there's your French augmented 6th going to 5.